did you say to eat more people first?
Yes, I meant the same meat, and it just did not come out right.
Back to the hunting topic.
And the food session.
Yeah. This is the 20-Minute Attorney Business Development Podcast. My name is Tobi Steinemann, and here with me to discuss how to treat existing clients is the man who will now tell me whether he considers himself a hunter or a farmer, Bill Burns.
You always come up with some unique way to get started. So, Tobi, I have to say both. I mean, I love the hunt. I love scoping out a new project, identifying the prospect, chasing it down. That's just a lot of fun. But also I'm a farmer because maybe not the emotional side, but the logical side of my brain understands that it's a lot easier to get work from an existing client. Spend a lot of time cultivating the fields you have. You can get a lot more produce out of them than trying to, break new ground. So I guess I'd have to say I'm a little bit of both.
So knowing what we planned on talking about today, you obviously went right into the business development direction and didn't consider the more obvious way of whether you're going to, in terms of nutrition, whether you're a hunter or a farmer. But we are a business development podcast, so well done.
Well, Tobi, if you want to turn it into a food episode, I'm sure that might boost our listenership.
Maybe going into a different direction. But for those who are listening now, I think we should stick to the attorney business development content for today, at least.
I agree.
We keep saying it, and I think most lawyers actually know it, that it, as you said, it is more difficult and much more expensive to acquire a new client compared to getting more work out of an existing one. In terms of preparation, I actually looked a little bit, tried to find some data on this as well. I found one research from Bain & Company that indicates or shows that increasing client retention by just 5% can boost profits by more than 25% already. That tells you something about the potential of your existing client base. Then there's consistent research showing that acquiring a new client actually costs 6 to 12 times more than retaining an existing one, with some studies putting even the number even higher. And then I found some industry surveys as well that tell you that fewer than 40% of the law firm partners, they actually know their client retention rate, which is also kind of alarming. You can maybe tell us afterwards if that's the case in your firm or if you think that's better there. And then in terms of actual figures, I guess that's a figure that's coming from the US, that acquiring a new client can cost upwards of $25,000 or more, and even take 1 or 2 years of work, with the conversion rate being between 2 and 10%, so quite low. In terms of, I don't know, do you have any examples or thoughts on these kind of numbers? Does that surprise you, or is that consistent with your experience?
Well, no, Tobi, doesn't surprise me at all. It's very consistent, and if you think about even the advice and counsel that we've talked about on these podcasts about developing relationships and how long it takes to get to know someone that's new, get to know what they need and to build trust. You think about all the time that's invested in doing that, all the time that's therefore not billed to a client because you're spending it in a business development mode. If you think about all of the effort that goes into marketing the firm and creating a brand that all supports what people do in business development, it absolutely makes perfect sense. What's one of the most infuriating things is when you hear about a client that is using another firm for something that your firm could do. Recently, I was talking to an attorney who said he was talking to this client, longtime client, that we do one very specific thing for, and the client asked him if he knew this other attorney from another firm. And he said, yeah. I said, how did you interact with them? And he said, well, we hired them to do this different practice. Won't say what it was to protect the attorneys involved. And the attorney says, well, we do that. We have a pretty good, department that does that work all the time with a lot of clients. And then the client said, well, I didn't know you did that. So it just right there is proof that, you need to continually educate your clients, not only about what you personally can do for them, but what your colleagues in your firm can do for them. That was a missed opportunity just because we didn't have that conversation.
Mm. Yeah, you can't expect a client to guess what other capabilities that you have in your firm. I would like to start today by talking a little bit about some traps and challenges, maybe in terms of client relationship relationship management.
Are these traps? Is this going back to your hunter analogy at the beginning?
No, it's not. It's not related. It's more related to being a good farmer, actually.
Okay.
So, what do you say to the statement that across the board, most law firms in the market, they only do two things that are exclusively tied to existing clients? And the first one is they send out a Christmas card or a New Year's card. And the second one is that they do an annual client event, barbecue or some sort of wine tasting or whatever.
Open house, whatever, yeah.
Yeah. There's that's basically the client relationship management playbook.
I think you've nailed it. I think there's just a big assumption that we have their work and they'll continue to give us work and we focus on the work. And if we do good work, that means we'll keep the client. And that's not always necessarily the truth.
And I mean, keeping the client. One thing that I also and I think your example there is actually quite a good one that you mentioned before. It's one thing whether a client is happy with your work, but it's another thing whether a client is a loyal one. So a happy client can be happy for one project, but it doesn't necessarily make it a loyal client.
One of the things I think that one of the areas I think that as an industry we make a mistake is we don't debrief when we finish a project. We don't ask a client how something went, what they liked, what they didn't like, what we could do differently, and also give them feedback about how they can actually be a better client. When we're providing service to clients, we find you run into constant inefficiencies or communication that's not smooth internally or that's not properly aligned internally, which can actually end up costing the client money because, we're spending more time chasing things down than we need to spend chasing things down. That can also, building that type of feedback into the relationship can really deepen that sense of loyalty because in many cases you can actually tell the client how they can improve and they benefit from that and they feel like they're getting extra value from the firm.
I think what's equally important from time to time, at least, is I would say appreciate, want, and enjoy. So that you actually say it out loud to the client. Hey, I appreciate your trust. I want to keep working with you, and I enjoy actually working with you. People actually like to hear that. And you cannot just assume that a client sees how much you care about this project and how passionate you are about something and how much you actually like working with them. That's not something that they just guess or that they think it's a given, but it's worthwhile to actually say it out loud from time to time.
I think expressing those thoughts makes it much more of a personal relationship and not so much of a business transaction. I think that, there is an emotional component to the work that the attorneys do and to keeping that work and to expanding that work. And I don't think people should be afraid to tap into that.
And I think that's probably also one of the traps here, that you actually look at it too much as a business development piece of work. And actually, I think that's the beauty of legal marketing or business development in the legal sector, is that it's so much. Actually, it's about human contact. It's about interacting. It's about small little gestures, consistency, and just relationship management and building. Whereas in other industries or with product marketing, it's actually about much more about the selling part. And here, the beauty of it is that you can focus on these human parts.
Well, absolutely. In the selling part, it's all about getting the sale. What you're describing is more about being authentic, my new favorite word in our current environment. And, that authenticity is what leads to building trust, which leads to loyalty and means that a client sticks around for the long haul.
Another challenge maybe from a firm perspective, that quite often you have a client, but you only have one single contact from your firm to that firm. So you can almost say if that relationship you have is based on one single contact, it's less of a client but more of a personal connection. So I think that's also something to look after when you actually think about client relationship management, to try and build a second relationship to make sure that if that person leaves that has the connection, then the relationship doesn't leave with it.
One of the things I often ask our attorneys is, when was the last time you actually visited the client? When you go to the client's office or factory or work site or whatever it is, depending on the client, you get the opportunity to meet more people than the one that you deal with all the time. You get the opportunity to expand those relationships and get to know the organization better. And the more you know the organization, I think the better opportunities that you have.
Did you say to eat more people first?
Yes, I meant the same meat, and it just did not come out right.
Back to the hunting topic.
And the food session.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you ask your lawyers how often they actually visit the clients, how often does that actually happen?
Not very often. I think COVID took us out of the habit of doing that, and then I think it's getting caught up in the busyness of the day to day. That someone says, well, that's going to take a couple of hours, and I don't have a couple of hours. It's something that's easy to put off when you have more urgent needs that you're responding to that are right in front of your face. But at the same time, if you're ignoring that, developing that relationship or expanding that relationship in the long haul, that may not be good for you.
I mean, all these digital meetings, obviously, they make a lot of things easier. When business started picking up again after COVID, people were just happy that it's so efficient and
Right.
it saves them a lot of time, right? And now we're starting to realize that these personal interactions, actually, business development wise, and probably also in terms of the success of a project, it still helps us.
We all spend so much time on Teams now. It's so much a part of our day-to-day existence. And it is easy and it is efficient, but it's not the same. You just don't have the same type of connection. Or at least I don't feel like I have the same kind of connection that I have with people when I meet with them face to face. They always tell you that a large part of communication, a majority of communication is body language. And it's difficult to get a lot of body language cues out of just a Teams video when you're mostly seeing someone's head and shoulders. One of the ways that, one of the things that's overlooked in client retention and client expansion, one of the biggest complaints that I hear from the clients that I talk to is responsiveness.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a basic of client service. And, rather than thinking about these, other strategies to expand work, I think, you have to start thinking about how are you doing in terms of keeping the work and doing the work. And are you responsive to client needs? Because that seems to be the biggest complaint that I hear from clients is that attorneys aren't responsive.
So meaning that when the client has a question, they send an email to the lawyer and then they don't hear from them for a couple of days.
That's exactly right. And clients expect to hear a response back right away. Even if you're so busy that you can't provide a fulsome response, just a response back acknowledging that, okay, I know you've got an issue. I've tied up in something. I'll get back to you. But we make the mistake of not even taking that step, which doesn't take that long, is very easy to do, but contributes tremendously to client satisfaction. There's the other mistake is just, I think sometimes that we wait for the phone to ring rather than picking up the phone and making the call and touching base and staying in contact. I think that simply taking that first step can do a lot to keep the lines of communication open.
So when you say that we wait or we should pick up the phone, so are you ringing the client for a question on a specific project, or you mean in general, just picking up the phone and calling them?
I mean both. I think picking up the phone sometimes, rather than getting into this, back and forth on email, where things are hard sometimes to clarify. Sometimes if you pick up the phone and make a short phone call, that can clarify everything in a hurry. That's harder to do via email than it is in a direct conversation. But also just picking up the phone and inquiring how things are going, touching base, making sure the client has everything they need, making sure something hasn't changed that they haven't had a chance to tell you about. I think it's important to reach out and be proactive in that sense. And if you go back to your statistics, which I thought were very compelling, these are things you can do that basically cost no money and are very easy to do and they don't demand grand strategies or significant planning.
I mean, they don't even require any training, right? So it's something that everybody can do, even if you were a lawyer and you never had any marketing or business development training. Yeah. Calling someone and having a conversation is something that obviously you can still practice it and get better at it and guiding it somewhere, but yeah, still start.
Yeah, just be a human being.
Something that is becoming more and more of a treasured asset, actually.
Absolutely. It's going to be a differentiator in this day of AI.
So what about other things that we can do? You mentioned it. I mean, being responsive is something. Being a human being, I guess. Generally, the basic rules of communication and decency they apply here as well. Obviously, that's all clear. But in terms of things that we can do to improve business development coming from existing clients.
Simply be curious. I mean, follow the company's news. If they make an announcement, pick up the phone and talk to your contact and express your interest in what the company is doing and ask questions. And those lead to the kind of discussions where the client actually starts to talk about an issue they have or an opportunity where they need help. And that's when you have the chance to offer that.
Do you guys use any technology internally to help your lawyers do client relationship management or client engagement, track opportunities, etc.?
We have a CRM system, and I think it does help. It helps. There's a way to track contacts and the level of contact with clients or prospects. I think that CRM systems, firms don't invest enough in making sure that they're alive and well. I mean, that information has to be kept constantly updated. And unless you have people who are doing that, because I'll be honest with you, the lawyers aren't going to update the information.
So who does it then?
You have to have a system for doing it that involves the legal assistants and other people who, it's their job when they come to work in the morning to pay attention to the CRM system being updated. I mean, do you know how they paint the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco?
You mean what color?
They start at one end and they paint the entire bridge. And once they're done at the other end, they move back and start again at the beginning. And I think it's the same attitude that you have to take to a CRM system. I think you have to constantly be painting it. You have to constantly update it. You have to systematically go through the whole firm and through all the lawyers and make sure their information's up to date and do it in an ongoing way. Otherwise, that information becomes old and not as valuable in a hurry.
So that means if, let's say, one of the lawyers has a phone call with a contact or a lunch with a contact and the assistant knows that and will put that information into the system, is that the process?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Or that legal assistant is is entering that attorney's time, and they're going to pick things off of their timesheet that should go in the CRM system. That's how we track how often the attorney's in touch with a client or a prospect or any news that came out of that, any information that's valuable for the future. But unless we attack that in a systematic way, we lose all that information. It's not kept. It's just in somebody's head, and that's probably not the best place for it to be in the long run. I don't think we do enough to train our attorneys on the front end to know how they can maximize their time and maximize the information that they gathered. And then we have to have an operating system that aligns with that so that it becomes useful for the entire firm. That's a significant challenge. And I think that there's a view that, it's kind of like the phrase, is there an app for that? Well, there's an app for that. You don't have to do anything. It just magically happens. Well, that's not the case. You have to put information into it for it to work.
Well, maybe these Facebook Meta glasses that will record everything that you see, then maybe these kind of things will help you to sort of input all the information that they record directly into your CRM. So maybe we can end today's session with a challenge for people out there listening. You mentioned that it's important to pick up the phone. So the challenge would be this week to pick out one client that you haven't interacted with in a long time. Schedule a 20-minute no agenda call. Specifically without any sort of project that you want to discuss. Tell them that you don't want to discuss a project. Prepare for that meeting. Think about at least one or two clever questions that could relate to what's happening in their business. So do some research, maybe 10 minutes research, 20 minutes call. It's half an hour of work, and you've done a big step of business development for this week already.
I think that's a great challenge. I love that challenge. Which client are you going to call?
Well, I'm not gonna say that out loud, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's the same for us. So there are a few people that are on my list that I need to call.
And it's the same for me. The attorneys are my clients, and I kind of have a running list of people I need to touch base with, so I need to make some of those calls.
Leading by example, the challenge goes out, so it's also a challenge for ourselves.
Yes, it is. I think it's the key for everybody, just to keep those connections warm and have a way of finding new information and new opportunity.
Well, Bill, thank you very much. This was episode 13, talking about existing clients to existing podcast co-hosts. It was nice seeing you again, and I look forward to our next one.
Well, and just one final question: you didn't disclose whether you're a hunter or a farmer.
Well, I must say I'm a farmer as well. Much more a farmer than a hunter.
Well, thanks, Tobi. It's good talking to you.